It began with a creak. Not the kind of creak that signals doom in a haunted house, but a gentler one. Wood on chain, metal on hook, swaying back and forth in the evening air. To some, it was the sound of comfort. To others, it was the sound of non-compliance. The year was 1996. The place, Willow Glen Estates, a modest subdivision in suburban North Carolina. The homes were brickfront, the lawns chemically green, and the bylaws stacked 3 inches thick in 3-ring binders. And on lot 42, a porch swing appeared. It wasn't large, nor particularly flashy. Painted white, hung by 2 sturdy chains, and positioned just right to catch the setting sun. Mr. and Mrs. Callahan had installed it one Saturday morning, aided by their college-age son and a borrowed power drill. By Sunday afternoon, they were sitting on it, side by side, gently rocking. They waved at neighbors who passed on the sidewalk. They offered lemonade to a teenager on a bike. By dusk, the swing had become part of the neighborhood scenery. But not everyone found it soothing. At 6:45 a.m. Monday morning, Nancy Yarrow, longtime chair of the HOA's Architectural Review Committee, spotted it on her way to retrieve the paper. She stopped in her tracks, bathrobe cinched tight, slippers on damp grass, and stared at the offending object. "Unapproved structure," she muttered, pen already scratching a note on the legal pad she carried everywhere. She circled it in her mind, the way it protruded slightly past the porch railing, the faint squeak of its chain, the undeniable invitation to linger. Nancy believed in efficient front yards. Lawns should be seen, not experienced. The bylaws clearly stated, no exterior modification shall alter the uniform appearance of community facades. Was a swing a modification or furniture? The language was vague, too vague for Nancy's taste. By mid-morning, she had placed 3 beer Chaz calls, one to the HOA president, one to the treasurer, and one to Harold, who prided himself on owning both a sound decibel meter and a copy of the Handbook of Residential Aesthetics, 2nd edition. On Tuesday evening, the HOA board met in the clubhouse. The agenda had originally included discussion of pet leash lengths, shrub trimming along the perimeter fence, and whether the pool vending machine should continue stocking grape soda. But the porch swing quickly overshadowed all other business. "It encourages loitering," Nancy said firmly, adjusting her glasses. "It encourages relaxation," countered Marjorie, who secretly thought a porch swing was rather charming. Harold produced a typed memo on the acoustic properties of porch swings in suburban settings, though no one had asked him to. He read 3 paragraphs aloud before being asked to stop. The Callahans themselves did not attend. They claimed a scheduling conflict, but their absence only fueled speculation. Were they defiant, unaware, planning more swings? By Friday, whispers rippled through Willow Glen Estates. Some residents quietly supported the swing. Others feared a slippery slope. If porch swings were allowed, what next? Hammocks? Rocking chairs? Heaven forbid, wind chimes. The HOA newsletter editor began drafting a special bulletin titled Guidelines for Appropriate Porch Use. She left blank space for updates, depending on the outcome of the next meeting. The Callahans, meanwhile, sat on their swing every evening, rocking gently as the sun dipped behind the cul-de-sac. They smiled at passers-by. They sipped sweet tea. The swing creaked contentedly, unaware of the bureaucratic storm it had unleashed. And so the stage was set. A community divided, a swing at the center. Next week's HOA meeting promised a vote, but in Willow Glen Estates, nothing was ever decided quickly, especially not when it involved leisure. The notice was slipped under every door on pale green paper, the same shade the board always used for urgent matters, distinct from the pale yellow of reminders and the pale blue of upcoming social events. Residents recognized it immediately because pale green usually meant something serious: an unauthorized basketball hoop, a holiday light display still up in March, or once, a dispute over a decorative bird bath that had escalated into threats of small claims court. This time, the headline read in bold capital letters, Agenda Item, Porch Swing on Lot 42. By 7 o'clock p.m. the clubhouse was full. Folding chairs creaked under the weight of retirees, parents with restless children, and the handful of young professionals who rarely attended, but showed up tonight out of curiosity. At the front of the room sat the HOA board, Nancy with her notepad, Harold with his decibel meter, Marjorie with a clipboard, and President Gerald Thistle, who looked tired already. The Callahans sat 3 rows back, calm as ever, as if their modest porch swing hadn't thrown the entire neighborhood into bureaucratic uproar. Nancy was first to speak. "We must recognize," she began, "that while porch swings may seem harmless, they pose a challenge to the uniform aesthetic of Willow Glen Estates. They extend beyond the visual line of the porch. They invite gathering. They create noise." She flipped a page. "I measured the creaking. 11 decibels. That is nearly audible from the sidewalk." A murmur rippled through the room. Harold then stood dramatically holding up a manila folder labeled Exhibit A, Photographs. He passed out copies of grainy Polaroids he had taken of the swing from multiple angles. "Note the asymmetry," he said gravely. "Our porches were designed to frame rocking chairs, not swinging ones. A swing breaks the line." Someone coughed. Someone else stifled a laugh. Then Marjorie spoke, gently. "I think," she said, "that perhaps a porch swing could bring the neighborhood together. A place for families to sit. A symbol of Southern charm." At this, Nancy pursed her lips so tightly they nearly vanished. "Charm," she said, "is not in the bylaws." The floor was opened for resident comments. Mr. Ellison of Lot 17 rose first. "What if children use the swing too roughly? What if the chains snap? Liability." He waved a copy of the HOA insurance policy for emphasis. Mrs. Patel of Lot 85 disagreed. "When I was a girl, we had a swing. My grandmother told stories on it every summer evening. If this HOA bans swings, it bans memories." A young man named Trevor, new to the neighborhood, simply asked, "Wait, there are rules about furniture on porches?" The entire room turned to look at him, and he quickly sat down. By 8:30 p.m., the debate had spiraled. Someone raised the specter of hammocks. Another mentioned rocking benches. A man in the back shouted something about sliding into chaos. The treasurer requested more data on squeak frequency. Finally, President Gerald rapped the table with his gavel. "The motion on the floor," he said wearily, "is whether to classify porch swings as unapproved exterior modifications." The vote was called. Hands raised. Counters tallied. The result? Tie. 4 in favor. 4 opposed. 1 abstention due to insufficient documentation. And so, the matter was tabled. The Callahans returned home that night, poured glasses of iced tea, and sat once again on their swing, rocking gently under the stars. From her window across the street, Nancy scribbled in her notepad, "Swing remains in use. Further action required." But for now, at least, the swing stayed. Unbanned, unapproved, unsettlingly popular. The morning after the tie vote, a curious thing happened in Willow Glen Estates. Conversations shifted from weather and recycling schedules to the swing. At the mailboxes, neighbors debated the finer points of bylaws while shuffling through coupon booklets. At the poolside, parents whispered about whether the HOA had gone too far. On the jogging trail, 2 retirees argued about structural integrity until both agreed to disagree and instead compared blood pressure medications. The swing had become more than wood and chains. It was now a question of principle. Nancy, ever methodical, decided that principle needed paperwork. She began drafting a petition titled, "For the Preservation of Uniformity," a petition against porch swings. The wording was stern, precise, and deliberately free of sentiment. Whereas porch swings are not specified in the architectural guidelines, and whereas their presence risks precedent for additional non-conforming furniture, we, the undersigned. She carried the document on a clipboard, collecting signatures in the evenings. Some residents signed quickly, afraid of confrontation. Others refused politely. A few asked if she had considered just letting people swing. Nancy did not write those responses down. Meanwhile, Mrs. Patel, inspired by her memory of her grandmother's summer stories, quietly began her own petition. Hers was handwritten on lined notebook paper with blue ink. Its title read, "Porch Swings for Community Togetherness." She collected signatures while offering cookies on paper napkins. Children doodled smiley faces in the margins. One resident wrote in capital letters, "Bring back simple joys." Thus, two rival petitions circulated. Neither side had more than half the neighborhood, but both gained enough support to make their presence undeniable. Then came the matter of precedent. Harold, the self-appointed archivist of HOA history, wheeled out a cardboard box labeled Archives, 1983-1995. Inside were yellowed newsletters, stapled minutes, and a brittle copy of the very first set of community guidelines drafted back when the subdivision was a dusty construction site with one model home. "There," Harold exclaimed one evening, pointing to a clause in the 1984 draft, "Porches shall maintain clean presentation with furniture appropriate to scale and purpose." "What does that mean?" asked Marjorie. "It means chairs," Harold declared confidently. "Chairs are appropriate. Swings are not chairs." But Mr. Callahan, who had quietly slipped into the meeting, countered, "A swing is just a chair that moves." The room fell silent. Even Harold had no ready reply. As summer deepened, factions solidified. On one side, the anti-swing coalition, mostly retirees, rule followers, and those who feared that deviation today would mean inflatable Santas tomorrow. Their motto, whispered but firm, uniformity above all. On the other side, the swing supporters, a looser group of young families, sentimental souls, and anyone who had once sat on a swing and felt the ease of rocking back and forth. Their motto, let the people swing. And in between, a nervous majority who just wanted the HOA dues to stay reasonable and the newsletters to arrive on time. The swing itself, meanwhile, remained unchanged. Each evening the Callahans sat upon it, sipping tea, greeting neighbors, rocking gently as cicadas hummed in the humid air. It neither grew louder nor quieter. It simply existed, a piece of wood and chain caught in a storm of paperwork and principle. But in Willow Glen Estates, existence alone was enough to spark debate, and soon a new development would raise the stakes even higher. Because late one Thursday afternoon, Nancy spotted something alarming during her patrol. On Lot 19, a hammock had appeared. It arrived quietly, as most revolutions do. A hammock, striped, cheerful, tied neatly between two oaks in the front yard of Lot 19, appeared on a Thursday afternoon. Its fabric swayed in the breeze, completely unaware of the chaos it was about to cause. Nancy spotted it first. She stopped mid-stride, clipboard under her arm, her visor tilted low against the sun. For a long moment she stared at it, squinting as though it might vanish if she simply refused to acknowledge it. But the hammock remained, bold in its defiance, striped in the most audacious shades of green and orange. "This," Nancy whispered, "is how civilizations crumble." By dusk, the hammock had become an attraction. Children climbed into it, giggling as they swung side to side. Neighbors paused during their evening walks, tilting their heads, remarking that it looked rather comfortable. To the anti-swing coalition, it was proof of their darkest fears. If porch swings were tolerated, hammocks would soon sprout across the subdivision like mushrooms after rain. And from hammocks, who knew? Gazebos, treehouses, heaven forbid, a trampoline. At the next HOA meeting, the atmosphere was tense. Nancy opened with a stern announcement. Lot 19 has installed a hammock. A hammock is neither chair nor porch appropriate. It constitutes a Category C violation under Section 7, subsection 2B, non-conforming yard installations. Gasps scattered through the community room. Someone muttered, "What's a Category C?" "It's worse than B," whispered Harold, though no one had ever seen a complete list of categories. The swing supporters, however, saw an opportunity. "Perhaps," Mrs. Patel suggested gently, "we are expanding the definition of relaxation furniture. First swings, now hammocks. Maybe this is not decline, but evolution." Mr. Callahan, rocking proudly in his metaphorical corner, added, "If you ban hammocks, what is next? Rocking chairs? Garden benches? Where does the banning end? A younger resident chimed in. Technically, my yoga mat is furniture. Are you going to regulate that too? The anti-swing coalition bristled. Voices rose, petitions were waved. Someone knocked over the complimentary bowl of peppermints. In the middle of the shouting, Harold once again turned to his archives. He flipped through yellowed bylaws, muttering. Finally, he jabbed a finger at a line from 1987. No temporary installations shall disrupt the harmony of community aesthetics. There, Harold declared triumphantly. A hammock is temporary. By definition, it disrupts harmony. But then Mrs. Patel countered. So are seasonal wreaths. Shall we ban wreaths? The room froze. Even Nancy hesitated. To outlaw wreaths would be to risk open rebellion. The debate reached such intensity that for the first time in Willow Glen Estate's history, the meeting ran long. The janitor gently rattled his keys at 10:30 p.m., hinting that the library conference room needed to close. With no resolution, the HOA board did the unthinkable. They tabled 2 motions in 1 month. First the swing, now the hammock. It was precedent on top of precedent, a slippery slope paved with wood, chain, and striped canvas. Back at Lot 19, the hammock swayed peacefully in the night breeze. Its owner, a quiet man named Jeff, had not attended the meeting. He had bought the hammock on sale, tied it up, and fallen asleep in it while reading a gardening magazine. When asked later, Jeff would confess he had no idea his purchase had become the second front in a community war. But wars often begin this way. One swing, one hammock, one small act of rest mistaken for rebellion. The hammock incident had changed everything. For weeks afterward, conversation in Willow Glen Estates was no longer about swings or hammocks. It was about survival. Could the community endure both without descending into chaos? Or was this, as Nancy warned, the thin end of the wedge? In an effort to prevent a full collapse of neighborly civility, a group of moderates, those who had signed neither petition, decided something had to be done. They were tired of whispered debates at the mailbox, tired of clipped remarks at the pool, and very tired of meetings that stretched past bedtime. So they organized what came to be known, in neighborhood law, as the Cul-de-sac Conference. It was not an official meeting. No agenda, no minutes, no gavel. Just lawn chairs dragged into the circular end of Hickory Bend Court, pitchers of lemonade, and a plate of slightly stale oatmeal cookies. Residents arrived slowly, some out of curiosity, some out of fatigue, all seeking a resolution. Nancy came too, clutching her clipboard like a shield. Mr. Callahan wandered in wearing slippers. Mrs. Patel brought a folding chair patterned with sunflowers. Jeff, hammock owner, showed up last, carrying the hammock itself under one arm. He set it down with a sigh, as though unaware it had become a symbol of sedition. The discussion began awkwardly, with muttered grievances and several tangents about recycling schedules. But then, something remarkable happened. People started listening. A retiree admitted she didn't mind swings, she just didn't want neon plastic playhouses sprouting like weeds. A young parent confessed he had no particular love for hammocks, but hated the thought of anyone telling him where he could nap. Jeff explained that he had bought the hammock because the store was out of garden hoses, and he thought it looked restful. Even Nancy, pressed at last, admitted, "It's not two. He's swing, it's the precedent. If we allow one exception, where does it end?" That night, in the glow of porch lights and citronella candles, a draft compromise took shape. Porch swings would be allowed, provided they matched the exterior trim and did not squeak audibly during quiet hours. Hammocks would be tolerated, but only if located behind the front property line and neatly tied. A new relaxation furniture subcommittee would be formed, tasked with defining what counted as permissible leisure seating. It was, in many ways, the dullest possible solution, but in Willow Glen Estates, dullness was stability. The compromise was not signed in ink, but in lemonade stains, cookie crumbs, and reluctant nods. For the first time in months, neighbors walked home without muttering under their breath. Nancy tucked her clipboard under her arm, still suspicious, but willing to wait. The swing stayed. The hammock stayed. And the subdivision exhaled, as though spared from some great upheaval. Yet in the quiet hum of summer cicadas, one could already sense the next storm. because just a week later, on Mapleview Drive, a resident ordered something from a catalogue that would test the HOA in ways neither swing nor hammock had prepared them for. A hot tub.